Alright, looks like we should be up and running. Welcome back to the channel, everyone, and welcome to what I'm going to be calling the Wednesday Night War Zone show. And this is the first time I'm doing this one. Normally I do an AEW review, then I do a separate NXT review, but going forward, I think what I'm going to try to do is just merge these two together and just have one big Wednesday Night War sort of podcast show, whatever you want to call it. So, yeah, we're going to get right into that. The one negative is just the watching these shows back to back like that is quite it can definitely be quite dragging for 4 hours worth, but when it's NXT and AEW, two shows that I generally really enjoy watching, I don't mind it at all. Those 4 hours flew by. So, I guess we'll start off with AEW, because I watched AEW live, then went back and went through NXT. So, we'll do that in the order of which I saw things. So, AEW Dynamite. We're going to start off right away with the Young Bucks versus Private Party. This is the first round of the AEW Tag Team Tournament. And if you go back to my predictions video, I predicted this whole tournament, went through the whole bracket. I have Private Party winning the whole thing, so it was good to see that off to a good start. This fun start, Cassidy gets the tag to Marquand early, who goes wild with all the dives, taking out both the Young Bucks on each side of the ring, like 4 different dives right in a row. Then gets one of them in the ring, hits a 450 for a near fall. After that, the super kick party commences. Powerbomb to the ramp takes out Cassidy, so Marquand is left on his own. And Young Bucks in this match, it's weird because they very much worked the heel in this match. And what makes it different from a WWE match, per se, is that it's not... While this followed the same formula as a WWE tag team match, where the heels work over the babyface team makes a comeback, and you get into the hot tags and all that. But it was different because it's the Young Bucks working as heels. So instead of putting on chin locks, they're putting on super kicks and Meltzer drivers. So I thought that was a good little difference there, with the Young Bucks working as the heels in this match, but still being able to make it an entertaining match. So, Private Party get the comeback. They hit a gin and juice followed by a Marquand shooting star press for a great near fall. They hit the gin and juice on one Buck, and then the shooting star on another was the near fall. And so we get into the finishing sequence here, because after that I kind of thought that the Young Bucks were going to win after they kicked out of that. But then the Young Bucks are going to go for a Meltzer driver, but Cassidy on the outside pulls one of them down when he's going for the springboard, pulls him out to the outside of the ring, which leads Marquand to get a victory roll up, pins whatever Young Buck was in the ring, Matt or Nick, I don't know. But big win, man, for Private Party. Maybe some people would complain it's a roll up. I mean, who cares? This was such a fun match. And I'm not the biggest Young Bucks fan either, because I just think a lot of the stuff they do looks too contrived. But this was so much fun to just watch. And, sometimes you just gotta turn your mind off and just enjoy what is being shown. And it's a different style, and sometimes it doesn't work as well for me as other times. But I definitely enjoyed watching this one. I find it interesting, though, that the Bucks were working heel as this match. And then they're going to be very much babyface later on in the night. And that's really one of my critiques of AEW, is that there's no real defined heel and face dynamic. Which, I guess isn't a terrible thing, because the Young Bucks worked this match as heels, but it wasn't a heel turn or anything like that. It was just for this particular circumstance. So, I don't know how I feel about that going forward, where everything is up to interpretation and able to be flipped back and forth like that. But, it results in more interesting matchups, I think, especially like with this Young Bucks and Private Party match. And as for Private Party, this is a huge win for them. Beating the Young Bucks on the national stage here. This could really be a coming out party for them. A private party for them, even. But I love what Private Party does. I think Mark Quinn could absolutely be a big star on his own, but I think him and Cassidy as a duo are very good together, and I think they're the perfect guys to put the titles on right out of the gate. I think I predicted that they would win this tournament. I see no reason to go back on that. I love Private Party being the inaugural tag team champions. Up next, we had the Faction of Jericho in the ring, man. I don't know. I struggled on that one. But, yeah, Jericho comes out to cut a promo with all of his associates. Jericho takes credit for AEW's rating last week. The crowd chanted, "Thank you, Jericho," but he did not want their thank you. Jericho puts over everyone in the group: Santana, Ortiz, Sammy Guevara, and Jake Hager, all in different ways. He called Sammy Guevara sexy, which was kind of weird, but, that judgment-free zone here. Like, you do you, Chris. He gets to Jake Hager, and that's when the crowd start chanting, "We the People," as they did last week when Hager debuted. So, that is when Jericho, who I'm sure thought ahead that this would be something that happened, and he was ready to fire at the hip for this one, and he says that "We the People sucked," is dead and buried, and was a stupid idea from bad creative. Ouch. We'll see if that tones down those chants. As Jericho goes through all of these guys, he says that they all made his list, which is interesting because before, in the old iteration of Jericho, if someone made the list, that was someone that Jericho hated. But now, in this case, they made the list of allies, I guess. So Jericho introduces this faction as the Inner Circle, and, at first I thought they were just going to be called the List, because he's going through all these guys and says, he made my list. So I thought it was just going to be, the group is called the List of Jericho. Jericho goes on to talk about Cody, says he hates Cody's whole family, saying that Dusty was a jerk, which got a good heat response. And he's going to beat Dustin's ass later tonight in the tag team main event. And tells Cody that at Full Gear he's going to, quote, beat the ever-living shit out of him. Because TV 14 and we can do that. So, this was an awesome promo by Jericho. And Hager is one of the guys I took notice of in this promo, because he stood there and had the same intimidating, pissed-off look on his face the whole time. He was stone-faced, did not move or say anything. And really, Jericho was the only one who talked. But still, this was an awesome promo, and I really think that this is one of the things that AEW has over NXT, among other things, is just this kind of promo ability from Jericho alone. And that that really goes a long way in being able to invest in characters. And, like, for me, Jericho is probably the... between NXT and AEW, I would say Jericho is probably the hottest star among either brand, really. I mean, that's my opinion, at least. Maybe I'm not thinking of someone, but I feel like Jericho feels like the biggest star on either show. And, maybe that'll wear off at some point, but for right now, I love everything Jericho's doing. Speaking of Jericho, after this is where we get the Jimmy Havoc versus Darby Allin number 1 contender match. The winner of this match will go on to face Jericho at the next week's show in Philadelphia. So I was ready to just not like this match because it's Jimmy Havoc and Darby Allin, and I figured it was going to be a bunch of hardcore nonsense. But they actually worked a match, and they didn't do anything stupid or over the top, and Darby is going to end up winning with a coffin drop, which I'm just going to say it looked terrible. Like, the move looks great when he misses it, but when the first time he actually hit it, it looked terrible. So, I don't know what's up with that. I think that he should just stop doing that altogether, especially onto the damn apron, or onto a set of steel steps with a Cracker Barrel. Just something to consider. But, hey, at least he finally hit one. And, Darby is one of the guys I am more interested in since his match with Cody, where they went to the time limit draw. Among, like, the deathmatch hardcore guys, like the Havocs and the Janellas, like, Darby is definitely the one I'm most interested in, because I feel like he has more character to him and more things that I could really get into with the skateboard thing and the everything else, having a death wish on himself. I could invest in that sort of stuff if they do it the right way. And I'm very interested to see what Jericho is able to get out of Allin next week, because his match with Cody was fascinating, because it went to a time limit draw, but Cody basically just beat the hell out of him for 20 minutes. So I'm going to be interested to see what Jericho does with him, and seeing, like, how much offense Darby is able to get in. Will there, like, if it's done right, even in defeat, this could be a really big match for Darby to be able to show off what he can do. So I'm definitely interested to see what him and Jericho do. After this, we had Bea Priestley and I forget what her first name even is. I think it was something like Emmy, Saqqara, versus Britt Baker and Riho. And I guess the story is that Riho was trained by Saqqara, is what they told us on commentary. There was a cool moment in this match where Tony Schiavone, who I believe, like, for the most part, hasn't watched wrestling, like, at all in the last 20 years, other than stuff that he's been a part of. But it was a cool moment where I believe it was Saqqara did a Vader bomb, and Tony Schiavone was surprised to hear either JR or Excalibur call it a Vader bomb, and he was like, "Wow, they really call it that now? That's pretty cool." So that was a nice, like, genuine moment, I thought. As far as the actual match, though, there weren't a lot of genuinely good moments. I really didn't like that Britt used a cutter or an RKO or whatever you want to call it as nothing more than a transitional move. It was just she hit it and then they both got back up and then she wasn't even on offense after that. So, didn't love that. This wasn't a great match, but Britt Baker gets a clean win with a submission on Saqqara. And this submission was fascinating, and I loved the take on it. But she basically did like a Rings of Saturn, but then also put in a mandible claw at the end. And that's when Saqqara tapped out. So, love that. Later on, it was announced that it would be Riho versus Britt Baker for the title next week. And after teaming this week. So, as far as all this goes, AEW has done an awful job with their women's division. And I mean like a god-awful job. And I don't know if that comes down to the people they have signed or if they don't feel like they have enough time to invest in these characters. But as far as exposure and any sort of character development, they haven't done anything for anyone in this women's division. I mean, like, you had Nyla Rose, but they beat her to death. Riho, which was like I get what they were trying to do, the underdog story and all that, but it didn't work, and I don't feel like we really ever got attached to Riho. And then Britt Baker, who I don't even think I mentioned it in the review last week, but she did commentary and did absolutely nothing on commentary to tell me anything about who she is or why I should care about her. All I know about Britt Baker is that she's a dentist, which isn't exactly firm character development. Like, I get it. She's a dentist. Tell me more. Let me know something. Anything. I don't know. And other than that, like, who else is there that they've spent any time on in their women's division? They spent time on Nyla Rose, but they beat her to death. She's dead. Dead in the water. They did the thing with Riho, and they tried. And other than that, like, I don't even know a lot of the rest of the women's roster. And, obviously they had the deal with Kylie Ray where, for whatever reason, nobody knows, but she ended up departing. And I believe I saw that she signed with Impact, if I'm not mistaken. But, I mean, maybe that was a big deal for AEW, that she was going to be one of the focal points of the women's division, and so this kind of caught them off guard. But that's not an excuse. Like, if one departure ruins the whole development of the division, then I don't know what that says. But, like, this is one thing WWE and NXT certainly have against AEW, because even though, like, I've complained about WWE's women's division, because outside of the top four, which are the four horsewomen, Sasha, Bayley, Becky, and Charlotte. I might have said someone's name twice, but you know the freaking four horsewomen. Outside of them, they don't have a lot of developed characters, but at least they have those four. Like, AEW has nothing in this women's division that has me interested in it at all. And I don't put that on the women that are, trying to do their best. It's a matter of, like, that we have one women's match on this show, and there was nothing to hook us into wanting more. And there was nothing that helped any characters or did anything for anyone. So, there you go. Rant's over. They did an interview with the best friends who are in the crowd, because all these tag teams, I guess, are just hanging out in the crowd now to promote this tag team tournament. So they do the interview with the best friends. I don't remember what the interviewer asked them. It was something like, how do you feel about private parties? Big win, and what do you think about the best friends in the tournament? And they just say, Well, that's not a question for us. That's a question for this guy. And then they part away to show that Orange Cassidy is sitting behind them. And he just gives a simple thumbs up. He's over. Like the crowd loves this guy. So, I don't know what this was all about, though. Next, we got Shawn Spears versus Jon Moxley. Jon Moxley is a debut on AEW television. Obviously, he had the match with Janela. That was his debut, but this is his debut on TNT. Out of nowhere, Pac is on commentary. Like, I didn't even notice that he was there until I just heard someone yelling, and I was like, who the hell is that? And eventually I put it together that it was Pac. But Pac is on commentary ranting about not getting a world title shot over, or a shot for a world title shot over Darby Allin and Jimmy Havoc. Talking about how he's 2-0 with wins over Kenny Omega and Hangman. And even talking about being undefeated basically for 2 years. The last 2 years he's only been pinned once, he said. And I don't know why he was on commentary for this match, though, and not Darby Allin and Jimmy Havoc's match, considering that that's what he was complaining about. But getting into the match here, Shawn Spears versus Jon Moxley. The referee is going to ignore blatant interference from Tully Blanchard, which is something that annoyed me in the Spears versus Cody match. And it continued here. Then later, Tully pushes Moxley into the steps. At least this time the ref was distracted. And, you know, I didn't really note a lot from this match. It was fine. You know, they worked well together. They did a lot of stuff on the outside. Like, there was a Death Valley driver into the barricade that looked pretty nice. But other than that, I mean, Moxley is going to win clean with the, I guess they're calling it the paradigm shift now. But, yeah, it just makes Spears look so bad that Tully cheats for him, and he still loses. And that was part of the things that I didn't like with the match with Cody, is that I felt like I didn't say they killed him, but they did no favors for him. And that's going to continue here. And I just don't know where they're going with Shawn Spears. And it just seems unfortunate. Because, like, I've watched the stuff that Shawn Spears and Tully Blanchard did, like, on the road to All Out, I think it was. If that's where the Cody and Shawn Spears match was. I think that's accurate. But the stuff they did with the interviews and everything they did together, like it can work. This can work, but it's not really being given a chance to. I didn't feel like Shawn Spears was the guy to put in there with Moxley for his debut. I feel like they could have gotten someone better and been able to let Shawn Spears do something else, but nonetheless. And to make matters worse, after Spears loses this match, Kenny Omega comes out with a broom and bat, both wrapped in barbed wire. He tosses the bat over to Moxley down the ramp. So they're going to have a duel, I guess. But before anything can happen, Pac leaves the commentary desk and attacks Omega with the steel chair. Moxley tells Pac to take a hike, and then looks over Omega but decides not to take advantage of Omega while he's down, which I did think that was a cool character moment, that Moxley wasn't willing to take advantage of someone else's work. Like it's like a cat, right? Or you know the laws of the jungle and all that. Like sometimes a cat won't want to eat something unless it's something that they killed. You know? So, maybe that's how Moxley is. He doesn't want to eat Omega until he kills him. We get to the main event now. It's Dustin Rhodes and Hangman Page versus Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara. This was a really fun main event, I thought. And took up the last, 15 minutes. But this finish was quite stupid. So, to run through it. Adam Page takes out Guevara with a moonsault to the outside. But then he gets blindsided by Jake Hager with a clothesline, which takes out Hangman. I guess the referee wasn't paying attention to that. But, as if that wasn't enough, now, after this, Dustin sets up Jericho for the Shattered Dreams, which, if you don't know what that is, basically he seats him in the turnbuckle with his leg on each side of the rope so he can kick him in the dick. And Dustin sets him up for this, but then the ref is distracted by Guevara, and so Goldust just stands there, or Dustin Rhodes, and while the referee is doing whatever he's doing, in comes Jake Hager, who clotheslines what's-his-face, Dustin Rhodes, and then just goes out the back door, out of the ring, and somehow, even though this was directly behind the referee, I realize you don't have eyes on the back of your head, but you have to be able to realize that someone entered the ring, clotheslined someone, and left. So, after that, that's followed by a Judas effect from Jericho, which gets the win for the team of Jericho and Guevara. After that, a brawl breaks out, and this will be an ending to AEW I think we can get used to. It's 2 weeks in a row now, it kind of ended like this. But a brawl breaks out, Hangman takes out Hager with a chair. The lights go out, and in comes Cody in, full suit. LAX run in, or Santana and Ortiz, I should say. They run in to take out Cody. So now it's 3-on-1 with Santana, Ortiz, and Jericho beating down Cody. But MJF runs in with a chair. And they did a great tease here because Jericho holds up Cody. And MJF takes second, but then he starts swinging away at Santana, Ortiz, and Jericho. But eventually Jericho is going to get MJF with a code breaker. And after that, the Young Bucks run in. They take out LAX while Jericho decides to get out of Dodge. But in runs, or in skates, should I say, Darby Allin, who skates down the ramp and takes down Jericho. And then after that, all the baby faces hold the ring, while the heels are left collecting themselves on the ramp. And the show closes with Jericho on mic telling Darby that he'll pay for that next week. It will be your funeral, bitch. Lovely. This segment made me so interested for Jericho and Darby Allin. And it really set up so many possible matchups, Dustin Rhodes versus Sammy Guevara, Adam Page versus Jake Hager, Santana and Ortiz versus the Young Bucks. They're both not in the tournament. They can have a match. And, so many others. This faction warfare sort of thing. You basically have the inner circle, and then you have the elite, pretty much. And it's funny that we have AEW on TNT, and 20 years later, now we have a different heel faction on TNT. Not the NWO, but the inner circle. So, I enjoyed this episode of AEW. I thought this was the better show of the night, but we'll get into more of that later. Other than the stuff with the women, which I ranted plenty about, I thought this was a really solid show. It was a pretty fun main event. There's still some kinks to be worked out there. There's a lot of the stuff that they do with these finishes and the referees and the ignorance of the rules in a wrestling match, I think that's the biggest thing that they need to get a grip on. Because when you're telling me that it's going to be a sports-oriented show, and, wins and losses are going to matter, then you have to protect the integrity of a win and loss too, right? Like, there needs to be, and that's not to say that a heel can't cheat to win, but you have to make it look better than what they're doing. And the stuff they did with Hager at the end here, where he comes in with the clothesline and somehow the referee just magically doesn't see it. And then earlier with the Tully and Shawn Spears stuff, that's their biggest minor flaw to me, is just the ignorance of the rules. And I feel like if they focus in on that more, they could really have a nice show here. Alright, so now we'll run through NXT. And I mean run through, like we're going to run through this thing. It starts off with Lio Rush versus Drew Gulak for the Cruiserweight title. This was a great way to put focus on the Cruiserweight division, which apparently might be in Full Sail more as of going forward. Lio is going to win this match with a frog splash into his beautiful springboard stunner, and then another frog splash. Crowd were into it, puts a big spotlight on the Cruiserweights, and a big win for Lio Rush. And, all for it. I love Lio Rush in the ring. I think he's a very talented guy. He had his issues with the main roster. Now he's in Full Sail. He gets to stay in Florida. He doesn't have to travel as much. There's not as much issues. I like what they have in him going forward. Then we get Rhea Ripley versus Leah. Rhea absolutely killed this poor woman, and it was awesome. The finish was great. Like, I love this move by Rhea, that she basically has Aaliyah in a cloverleaf, but it's more like, it's not like a traditional one. Like, she's just holding her up in the air. And then she ends up planting her face first, and then puts in the submission, and Aaliyah taps out. Beautiful. Then, after that, cuts a promo, simply says that, Shayna, I'm coming for you. And, yeah, I'm very much into Rhea Ripley versus Shayna. I think Rhea is going to be the one to take the title off of Shayna. I've been saying that since a couple weeks ago. And I'm really into what they're doing here. After this, we had Xango come out as construction workers. And there are all sorts of sexual innuendos here that Beth Phoenix had on commentary that I'm sure Edge will be happy to hear about. Like she said, they gave me great advice on how to clean my pipes. And Nigel McGuinness said that she must have been having flashbacks to her bachelorette party. The Forgotten Sons, I guess, attacked the team that Breezango was supposed to face, which I didn't even get a name for. So they just go in there and have the match with Breezango instead. Forgotten Sons are going to pick up the win here with help from Jackson Riker on the outside. Riker took out Breeze, turning it into a 2-on-1. Dango hit the dive on Riker, but then gets hit with a dive and then gets hit with a wicked double foot stomp into an inverted DDT combo for the win. So, I don't really know much about the Forgotten Sons because I've talked about it on these NXT reviews before. The move to USA is the first exposure I have to the weekly NXT product. Before that, I would just watch the takeovers and have fun with it, and it would always be worth my time. But I haven't watched the 1-hour weekly shows. So these 2-hour shows, these first, I guess this is the 4th week, is the introduction of it to me. So I don't know much about the Forgotten Sons. This was a fine win for them. We'll see what they do going forward. Now we had Boa versus Cameron Grimes and his stupid little hat. I'm so over this Cameron Grimes guy. Like, I know that he was in the breakout tournament and I guess lasted until the end of that, but I ain't watched that, so I don't know. I've only seen him on the USA versions of NXT, and I have nothing, like, who the hell is Cameron Grimes? He comes out there with his jacket and his hat, but I don't know anything about him. I don't have any reason to care about him. And now, for the second time, he just wins as soon as the bell rings with a double foot stomp. And by the way, the side tangent, the double foot stomp has become like the most overused move in wrestling, out of nowhere. Like, if I were Finn Balor, I would be pissed seeing the amount of double foot stomps that are used on this show when he has to come back and use a coup de grace as his finisher. But that's a minor detail. I don't know what the deal is with Cameron Grimes or why I'm supposed to care about him, but they haven't given me a reason to, so nothing more to say. But I guess he did kind of win by a slight distraction by Killian Dane, who walks out as the match is starting, and then as Grimes gets the pin, he gets up out of there, and Killian Dane kills Boa. And then Dane says this is just the beginning. So we'll see what they're doing with Killian Dane going forward. I like Damo. I like what he's capable of doing, and I think NXT is a good home for him. Really like some of the matches he had with Matt Riddle, and really just glad he's not wearing a singlet in Sanity anymore. We had Roderick Strong versus Isaiah Scott. This was a really fun match. I really enjoyed this. And mostly because of how giving it was to Isaiah Scott. Scott had a lot of nice offense going early and really throughout the whole match. And I felt like Scott, even though he was in defeat here, was really a made man in this match because this is the first match I've seen from him. His offense was crisp, really athletic, and really fun to watch. The Undisputed Era are gonna come out to the ramp midway through the match. Scott, and this was one of my favorite moves, even though it revolves around, guess what, another double stomp. Scott hit a ridiculous double stomp where, I'm trying to figure out how to explain this, but Roderick Strong, he's on the apron and he gets hit down, but it's like his feet are still on the bottom ropes, so he's basically being propped a little bit and he's trying to gather himself, but Scott does a springboard off the over the ropes and just double stomps the chest of Roderick Strong. That was a really nice move, even though it's a double stomp, which I just ranted on. Scott takes his eye off Strong for a minute to look back at the Undisputed Era, and that's when he gets hit with a running knee, end of Heartache, and into the Stronghold for the tap-out win for Roderick Strong. Really liked this. I do think that double stomp to the outside should have felt like a bigger move, because as soon as Scott got back into the ring, he just gets hit with the running knee. So I felt like they didn't get the most out of that move for how good it looked. But either way, really, really good match and a good showing for Isaiah Scott. I look forward to seeing more of him going forward, because really enjoyed that match. It might have been the best match of the night. Cole is going to cut a promo afterwards, saying, "No one will dethrone the Undisputed Era." Dream comes out, Velveteen Dream. He interrupts, shows the infamous photo of Roderick Strong with the North American title that we've all seen at this point. The recreation of the Shawn Michaels picture with the title, where he has nothing but the title on. But Dream says that after he wins the title back, we will see that Roddy, quote, doesn't measure up. And then showed a different photo, a photoshopped photo, without the title, and a really tiny little censorship, little red X out thing. I don't know what you call that thing, the circle with the cross through it. But, yeah, the joke was it was a really small censorship. You see, insinuating that Roderick Strong has a small penis. Riveting stuff. I love Dream, and this is part of his character, so I won't really vent on that too much. But this was a bit silly. Then immediately after that, Tommaso Ciampa comes out with a chair and a crutch, and Undisputed Era leave the ring like they couldn't take this dude 4-on-1, but whatever. Ciampa sits down. And he just simply says, Goldie, which is the NXT title, Daddy's home. And that was pretty much it. So, looks like we're going to get Ciampa versus Cole at some point. I would imagine that Ciampa is going to take the title off him sooner than later. We get Dakota Kai versus Bianca Belair. This was a pretty solid match. I thought they were going to give Kai a big win here with the investment they had in her the last couple weeks. And have they had Belair on since they moved to USA? Because I haven't recalled seeing her on TV. I could be wrong there. But Belair is going to win with the KOD. Cuts a promo afterwards, seemingly setting up a match against Ripley for a number one contendership match. The winner would end up facing Shayna. I'm assuming that's what they're going to do with the promo she cut afterwards. And then we get the main event, Kushida versus Walter. Early on, Kushida flubbed up on a springboard, so Walter just kicked him in the face. As it should be. I hate when somebody botches something or somebody slips and it throws off the whole timing of the match. Just do what Walter did. Just kick the fucker in the face and move on. Good work from both parties in this match. This was a really well-worked match, I thought. Kushida throughout trying to get the submission on Walter, the arm submission. Towards the end, he finally does, but it's not enough because Walter manages to get to the ropes. But for whatever reason, Walter ends up winning with a ripcord clothesline, which I don't know if that's one of his finishers, but it was weird that the match ended like that. And yeah, that was it. Walter is still one of my favorite wrestlers alive, and the limited sample size I've seen of him. But the Walter versus Tyler Bate match was all I needed to be sold on Walter, as well as the Walter versus Pete Dunne matches. All beautiful, elegant stuff. Walter is a brilliant professional wrestler. And this was fine. I ranted last week about how they didn't really do much for Kushida to really make it seem like he had a chance against Walter at all. They did more for him in the actual match. It was a fun little big man, little man dynamic, and Kushida was able to get some stuff in, and I don't want to, like, it wasn't to the level of the Scott match with Strong where you really get someone over in defeat, but they did help Kushida in this match, and yeah, that have no complaints on that. So, closing thoughts. I mean, I definitely thought AEW was the better show this week. To me, NXT is still missing something, and I feel like there's just a lack of emotional investment into a lot of the guys. And like, when I say a lot of the guys, I don't mean like the top guys, like your Velveteen Dreams, like the Undisputed Era, Champa. All those guys are made, and they're good to go. But it's hard to get into some of these lower on the card guys without giving me much reason to be invested in them. And I admire that NXT goes for a very wrestling-oriented show. And I love that about them. and that's why I love the takeovers and everything that they normally do. But to me, there just needs to be more. Like these, I think that's part of it is that in AEW, and it's partially because the arenas, like Full Sail holds 400 to 500 people, where AEW, at least these first couple shows, are being sold out to 10,000, however many. But the guys in AEW just seem like bigger stars at this point. And that's not to say that, that they're bigger stars than, like, the top guys. But I feel like throughout the card, the guys on AEW feel more important. And, like, NXT, like I ranted about the whole Cameron Grimes thing. But to me, there's just a lack of emotional investment in these guys. To me, at least. I mean, I could be wrong about that. Maybe the guys that watch NXT on a weekly basis and have since before the USA deal can kind of chime in. Like, let me know what you guys think. Do you feel like there's a little bit of a drop-off between the top of NXT's card, like your Undisputed Eras, your Johnny Garganos, Tommaso Ciampas, Velveteen Dreams, Matt Riddles? Do you feel like there's a bit of a drop-off there? Because to me, I just feel like there's not enough depth here in the characters. So, let me know what you think about that. I am tired as all get out now after watching these 4 hours of wrestling in one night. But glad to get this up on the channel. Thank you all for watching, and we'll be back tomorrow for some stuff on the channel. Friday we'll have SmackDown, and yeah, other than that, be back for Monday. I think will be the next time after that. But thank you all for watching. Later.